Hello and welcome to this talk on sustainable software. You mentioned sustainability earlier in the keynote, so I guess I should change this to green software so that you understand what it is. How to live without software shame. And I want to start with telling you a small story about a talk I had with my Polish neighbor who lives next door. I was asking her about traveling destinations in Poland, and she told me about this city called Zakopane that is on the border to Slovakia, where they have this amazing mountain range and lots of hiking trails. And she said it's like a sacred place in Poland. So if you like mountains, you should really go there. And then I asked her, okay, but what's the best way to get there? Because it seems like a long drive. And she said, yeah, it's probably best to take the plane, I think. But then she went like, I don't know, it's a bad tip, right? Because you see, she's a vegetarian. She has adopted both her dog and her cat. So this is a morality problem for her to fly that short distance. So our conversation went from, dreaming about traveling destinations to climate anxiety. And after that, I thought about the Swedish word that I wished that I had introduced to her, and it's flygskam. It literally translates into flight shame, and it's the feeling of climate anxiety related to airline travel. And I'm sure that some of you have felt that way, maybe when you could have taken the train instead of flying, or when you felt ashamed maybe that you took a little short trip to New York. But it's not very strange to feel that way, I think, because the aviation industry stands for 3% of global carbon emissions. That's a lot. So we really need to change how we travel. The problem is that the software that we use and the software that we build, and when that software is, running somewhere in the cloud, it has the same carbon footprint. So shouldn't we feel software shame as well? So, for those who don't know me, my name is Sofia, and Monday to Friday I work as a software developer. And when I'm not working, I'm podcasting together with Madeleine, who is my co-host, and Gustav, who is our editor. And you can also speak Russian to me. I was born in Moscow, but I was raised in Stockholm, and now I live in Malmö. And today we are going to look at some facts and research to understand what causes those 3%. And then we're going to look at some ideas on how to solve that and some good practices. So, to get back to the 3%. 3% is the carbon emissions from data centers, or what we usually call the cloud. That number is a bit, it's different depending on where you read. It can vary from 2 to 3.6%. But just to understand how big that number is, it's the same as the entire world's aviation industry. Or if you would like to compare it to a country, it would be the carbon emissions such as a country like Germany. And they rank number 6 of the highest emitters in the world. And, you know, as I said, this is only the data centers. It's not even like the production emissions from our phones and laptops. And it's not even how much carbon is produced from sending network requests, because they need to travel through all the software layers like routers, you know, to what can be on the other side of the world. And our industry is the fastest growing industry in the world. So if we don't start to change anything, this number will exponentially increase. So by 2040, it's going to be 14%. And that's what USA emits today, I think. And this is because of digital transformation and, you know, the rise of AI applications. So first, in order to reduce our emissions, we have to understand what the emission driving sources are. Code by itself doesn't produce any carbon. But as I said, when we run it, it uses electricity. And that doesn't seem like a problem at first, because we always talk about electricity as a solution to all of our carbon-related climate issues. Like, oh, you should switch to an electric car. But that can really fool you, because just because you stopped burning what's it called, fossil fuels in your car engine doesn't mean that it wasn't burned somewhere else. Since the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels has been dominating global electricity production. This is from 2019, where fossil fuel-based energy were at 64.2%, with coal as the fastest growing source of electricity. And if we want to reach net zero emissions 2050, coal has to drop by 6% per year. But in the latest forecasts made this year, coal is going to go up by 5% this year and 3% in the next year. It will take fossil fuel-based electricity to an all-time high. That's kind of going the wrong way. So electricity can be really, really dirty. And we also have to understand that it's not produced in the same way. It depends on where you are. So, for example, France is a light-colored region here, and it's because they use most of their electricity from nuclear power, and it doesn't have any direct carbon emissions. Or if you look at Sweden and Norway, we mostly run on renewable energy like solar or wind power. And that's good, it's clean. But the problem is when the sun is not shining and there's no wind and everyone wants to watch Netflix and cook dinner and run their dishwashing machines at the same time, we run out of it. And we have to start buying energy from other countries, or we have to power up our nuclear plants. So it becomes a mix. And I don't know why, I always imagine it like this. This is our renewable energy, and then it stops blowing and it goes like this. Okay? It becomes julmust and water. No, but you get the point, right? It becomes this dirty mix. So the lower the carbon intensity is, the greener the energy or electricity. So carbon intensity, it is measured in grams of CO2 that is produced per kilowatt hour consumed. But that's hard to understand. So this is a very good map showing it. And I recorded this GIF a couple of days ago, where we can see that the carbon intensity changes depending on country. So if you look at Poland, it's like almost brown, black color. And that's because 80% of their electricity comes from coal. And we can also see arrows going out from different regions. And that's when we export electricity, or countries that import it. So you can see that Norway exports a lot of renewable energy, because they run on, like, I think mostly on over 90% on renewable energy. So maybe you start to see here that it matters where and also when we run our code. But it's still hard to imagine, like, okay, but does a website make any significant carbon footprint? Or even an AI model, which consumes a lot of power, but is it really that much? So I'm going to give you two examples. There's a website called websitecarbon.com, and in here you can put in a web page URL, a public web page, and see how much that web page carbon footprint is. So here I used apple.com/iPhone 13 Pro, because I really want to check out their new phone. And I get this result. Uh-oh, this web page is dirtier than 93% of web pages tested. Disgusting. But what does that mean? Okay. Oh my. It almost produces 5 grams of CO2 every time someone visits it. And 5 grams of CO2, you can imagine it's like, you know, dirt in the palm of your hand every time. Look. And I don't have an example with a good website here. I should have put it in here, but then I tested IKEA.com, and they were like, oh, this site is greener than, I don't know, 70% of all web pages tested. Yeah. So you can really make a huge difference. I think if you have checked out apple.com, they use a lot of animations, and IKEA doesn't, because yeah, you get the point. Another example, artificial intelligence. It's a really energy consuming process. So some researchers wanted to find out how energy consuming it is. So they took some pre-trained natural language processing models, or NLP. NLP is like a computer program that can understand humanly written or spoken text. It could be a chatbot, for instance. And they didn't want to measure it only in CO2. So they took a car, the lifetime emissions of a car, including all the fossil fuel it will use and the production emissions from it, so like everything. And that's 57 tons of CO2. But we don't care about that, a car. And they took a model and they trained it for 3.5 days. And after 3.5 days, it produced 284 tons of CO2 emissions. And maybe you're faster than me in counting, but it's 5 times the carbon footprint of a car during its whole lifetime, like 3.5 days. I would feel so bad from doing this research, but for me it's mind-blowing. So now we know that electricity can be really, 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 really dirty because it can come from different energy sources. And we also know that we have clean energy, like solar or wind power, but it's not available at all times. There's still not enough of it. So we have to be smart about how we use the electricity. And we also saw that like a simple website can actually produce a pretty significant amount of carbon emissions. So websites can be dirty too. And now let's look at some ideas on how we can solve this. And I want to start with my favorite one because it's a low-hanging fruit. So as we saw, different regions have different carbon intensity profiles. So it matters where we put our code. And I have an example from Google Cloud, but it's the same for most big platforms, that you can choose region. It's literally a drop-down list. And Google has made it so that you have small green leaves where they say that, okay, this region has a lower carbon footprint. So already in this step, we can make a choice. So good, Google. And this is a good one too, because it's so simple. So each time you visit the website, it will emit some CO2 emissions. And for many, many web pages out there, every time you visit it, and even when you just reload the page, it will create the content every time. And that web server that creates it could be on the other side of the world. So it has to travel through all the network layers and go to that server, fetch it back, just when you reload the same thing. If you don't use caching. And caching is what makes websites like performant and responsive. And it's usually more cost effective, and it's a good choice for a lower carbon footprint. So I have one example here. I think it's the most simple technique, and it's a local caching. So you can fetch the content once, and then each time you reload that page or need it again, you fetch it from your local device, local cache. And you know, there are other types of caches, like shared caches, gateway caches, CDNs. So we have a lot of tools there. And it's also important to understand how we use different types of computing resources. So we have this whole table where we can choose from different resources when we have the cloud, right? But this graph, it illustrates that as the degree of abstraction goes up, so does the cost of compute. But when we abstract things, they are usually easier to scale up and down. So you have to choose wisely. So if we take just bare metal as an example, it's a physical server, for example, that you can go and buy and place in your basement or wherever people place them. And it will be the cheapest one in the long run. It will cost much when you buy it, but it's usually the cheapest in the long run. But the problem is, if Black Friday starts and you have to scale up, you will have to run and buy a new server. And by the time that you have installed it, it will be too late. Black Friday is over. But yeah, now it lasts for a month, so maybe it's not a problem at all. And on the other side, you have things like cloud functions. They are the most expensive per request, but you only pay pay for that energy when you use them. So if you only need something a couple times a day or a couple times a week, then it's a good alternative. And they are super easy to scale up and down. You don't have to do anything. So it's good that we have all these choices, but you have to really think about which one you choose, so that we make a better use of the underlying hardware. This is interesting too. We have container technology, and it helps us shift workloads. And we also have these APIs which shows us the carbon intensity in different regions. Like, I have this example here of electricity map. They have an API, and it's the same that they use for the colored map that I showed you. So they can give you forecasts about the carbon intensity in a few hours in a region. So if we had like a Kubernetes cluster, and we already know that we need to scale up the cluster soon for Black Friday, we could move the cluster to a region where we know that it's going to blow in the next couple of hours. And I saw that Google called this carbon-aware load shifting, and I liked that. And like in most cases, if you want to be successful at something, you have to measure your progress. And measuring will be really important for organizations that work on lowering their carbon footprint. So the big cloud providers, they're very much aware of this. So just like a month or a little more ago, both Azure and Google Cloud released these measuring tools. One is the Microsoft Emission Impact Dashboard, and then the other one is Google Cloud Carbon Footprint, I think it says. And they are both tracking your carbon footprint and help you analyze it. Super cool, I think. And there are more and more tools like this popping up everywhere. And if you are like me and you realize that this is something I must do something about, you may feel a bit alone. Of course, now you have me to talk to. I can talk about this all day, but I don't have all the answers. So when I started researching this, I found this community that is called Climate Action Tech. And they have about, I think, 3,000 members who all work in the tech industry. And they are all discussing and working on solving these issues. And so they have a pretty big Slack channel that is very active. So any question you put out there will be answered. They have threads for, website performance, infrastructure, sales, everything. So I encourage you to sign up there. So I asked if we should feel software shame. Of course, it's up to you, but I don't think so. And I don't feel that way. And it's because we used that word a lot today, but I feel empowered by knowing that I can do lots of things. So it doesn't depend if you're a developer, a performance expert, a tester, operations support, UX designer. You all have a part to play here. And we build things that reach hundreds, thousands, and even more people. So we can change the carbon footprint by a lot. And we are not the aviation industry. You know, they can't choose anything else than run on fossil fuels. Not yet. But we have a choice. And if we have a choice, then we should make a difference so that the end users don't have to feel software shame and climate anxiety and flight shame. So we can choose where we run our software, we can choose how to use electricity efficiently, we can choose to design sustainable products that help customers make the right choice. So I would really wish that all of you and me would go out there and start talking about this and help our clients make this change, because they are going to need us. You also said 1,000 times today, every company is becoming a technology company. So they are going to start measuring their carbon footprint, right? And they are going to measure it in their software. So when we start doing that, I really think that we can become the first big industry that become fossil free. And that's super cool. And that's everything for me. Any questions?
So technology as a sort of on a solution can both increase efficiency and therefore reduce carbon footprint on the problem domain, but it can also, in the instance of like e-commerce, increase consumerism and sort of decrease or worsen the carbon footprint. What would you say is our current like net carbon footprint in the tech side of things, and is that improving? Please repeat the questions.
For all the stream viewers, could you repeat your question? I would need to. Okay, so you're asking like what the total carbon footprint is?
Yeah, for like tech solutions, is the net, are we like net positive on the carbon footprint? So are we solving and removing problems that were more carbon heavy than?
Okay, yeah, so, okay. We have a carbon footprint, but we also help making by digitalizing lots of stuff, we remove it too. It's very hard to count like how much difference we make, but I saw a talk about it, and I think that it was that the carbon emissions are going up, like the world's carbon emissions. So even though we are digitalizing and we're lowering them in some fields, it's still rising. So I guess that my guess is that, yeah, we're making a good impact, but a bad impact too. I don't know if that's an answer. Yeah.
I'm very interested into how the AI consumption was calculated. Do you have any insights on that? Because it was baffling, honestly.
Yeah, this was sorry. The question was how the AI model, which AI model they used and how they calculated the footprint.
Yeah.
So what I know from this research paper, that they used a big AI model. It's called a transformer model, I think. And they used different cloud providers. So they counted it for, I think it was AWS, Google, and Microsoft. So it depended on which one. So I guess this was their most shocking result. But when they trained a smaller model, like a model that is more normal to train, it still released like the carbon emissions from a flight between New York and LA or something. So it was still a big carbon footprint. Yeah, though. Yes.
First of all, awesome talk and awesome talk.
Thank you.
But it seems that one of the recommendations, and maybe I got it wrong, is that we would choose kind of like servers where green energy is produced or preferred. But that seems like, in a sense, that, okay, let's say Sweden today produces a lot of its energy based on renewable energy. As soon as all the internet sites would decide that they're hosting in Sweden, Sweden would have to increase its power production. So in essence, the issue isn't really about the software as much as it is the power production. I'm not trying to deviate like the blame, but is there a way that we can somehow encourage, perhaps with hosting or preferring hosting, or like to indicate to countries that we would want greener like energy production as well?
Okay, if I will try to sum it up, like you say that maybe the problem isn't the software that we build. The problem is that there is not enough green energy, and we should make countries produce more renewable energy. Yeah, you're completely right. It's like cars aren't the problem. It's the fossil fuels that we, run it with. Yeah, I thought about that too. Like, why aren't every cloud provider running only on green energy? And I think Google Cloud almost run all their software centers on renewable energy, but there's just not enough of it. Even though they're saying that our electricity is green, it's just that they are buying market shares in green electricity, but then the electricity is still a mix. So yeah, we should push countries and politicians and everyone with the money to build more renewable energy production thingies. But yeah, you know where we are right now, and this has to do with the Paris Agreement and everything. There's just not enough of it. The biggest growing source of electricity is still coal. So we have like many years to get there. So we need to do something about our software. Yeah, Ilkin, right? If it runs in data centers, yes. No, I haven't checked it out yet, but it's a lot.
Before Bitcoin mining, how much that is consumption?
If I know how much Bitcoin mining uses. No, I don't know the number.
I suppose since that's like the most of the consumption, like they're saying that Bitcoin mining consumes like countries' energy consumption. Maybe that's why it's increasing so much. I was just curious if that's the real case with the Bitcoin chains.
I don't hear the question because someone else is talking. Of course it does. Maybe I don't know where they run it. If they run it, most of it in their basements, but of course it's like, like the AI model. It uses lots of electricity, and maybe they run all of those Bitcoin mining centers in Poland, and then it's only coal. So I will have to check that. Yes.
I've seen figures that about
only about 20 to 40% of the CPU usage, available CPU usage is actually used. So the rest is just a waste because the computer still emits energy. Do you know if these figures have improved of going to the cloud, or if there has been an overuse instead?
I know that the energy, like the efficiency, has improved drastically. The cloud providers are doing everything they can in their data centers, like cooling and utilizing the resources as best they can. But there's like a limit. But I don't know the numbers exactly, but I saw something about like how it was like a large number about how much the energy they have saved in the last 5 years. Like when they're putting data centers underwater and everything. So it has become a lot better, but I don't know if you wanted a number or just, yeah. No, but the cloud providers are doing everything, and they want to go over to using renewable energy sources only. So of course they're doing everything they can. Yes.
All right, we have a question on Slack.
Mm.
Tobias Banter wants to know, are there any upcoming legislations to help us control the impact on the tech industries?
Like political, I should maybe say that question again. Are there any legislations coming up to control the impacts? There are much talking about it, not only for IT, but legislations for companies in Sweden or in EU. And I think it will be coming in 2 or maximum 5 years. But I don't know anything about specifically in IT. I don't think they target it's like if you feel flight shame or maybe you don't. But my personal opinion is that yes, we should take more responsibility because lots of companies through the history, like since industrialization, have put the responsibility on the end users, saying that like, yeah, but it's your fault. You are demanding us to produce more fossil fuels. So the aviation industry, they are not like reducing number of flights. They blame it on us. You want it, so we give it to you. But I think the end users are part of the solution. We should educate them, but it's our responsibility too. We can at least give them the choice. Like, do you want to run Netflix in eco mode or in dirty mode? Yeah. Yeah. A very, very good point. Dirty mode. It sounds like something else, right? Okay, anyone else?
I have a question about the accuracy of those carbon emission websites. I mean, energy gets exported, electricity gets exported country-wise, back and forth, all over. So how accurate is figures about each country emissions? This is the production of each country, or is it how much they export to other countries? Sweden imports and exports, so for many other countries. So
Okay.
maybe it's going away from the actual problem, but it was just a curious note.
There's a problem. There's a question about the electricity map that I showed, right? The live update that data, how accurate it is. I think it's pretty accurate because it's used like in every talk I've ever seen about this. They are French who make this API, and I guess that they are gathering real-time data from countries, but then I don't know if the data coming from those countries is reliable or not. I haven't fact-checked it enough. But it's the electricity map is used by researchers when they are talking about this. So I'm counting on their fact-checking. Yes, Sair?
So I was curious about the one where you put in a website that tells you the emissions of this website. How can they come up with that number if they don't have information about the regions in which people are accessing this website or where the servers are? Do they have that information, or is it just sort of multiplied and averaged to whatever, I guess the kilobytes or something?
Okay, so it's a question about that website I showed, carbon website, carbonfootprint.com, how accurate that is. And yeah, I think that they just make an estimation. They just say that if 1,000 people are visiting this website, it would probably produce this much. And sometimes I don't know how they do it, but they can see where that website is hosted, and sometimes they can't. Like I tried with 1337's website, and it can't really tell if it's hosted on a green from a green cloud or not. So no, I don't think it's super accurate. I also thought about like, yeah, but what about caching, and do they take that in account? But I think that you should just use it as a good indicator. Like I compared Apple to IKEA, it was a big difference, and then you can look at the websites and like, is it because they're using many animations or yeah.
Follow-up question: Slack emojis. What is the carbon cost?
What is the carbon cost of Slack emojis? I don't know, but I saw some like crazy numbers about the cost of, like, you know, all the just reply messages that we send to people, like, okay, thanks, see you later. Like if you took all of those, like if everyone in England, I think, or Great Britain, I don't remember, would like delete those because they are stored somewhere and are taking up energy to be stored, then they would save, like, I don't know, enormous amounts of like flight trips between Barcelona and London. It was a crazy number. Because we store so much data, and we will store more and more and more, and big data is becoming huge data and everything. That's a problem too. But no, I don't know the cost of Slack emojis. Okay. I was like, can we drink beer now? Yes.
Okay, so this is more of a comment than a question, but I think it's quite interesting if we, in the future, as developers and architects, can, when we are at the client and they ask us to design a solution, if we, on top of the presenting like a visual diagram, we can say that this is a solution designed for carbon efficiency, then we have something. Then we have, it's business-wise also cool, because we can sell it. And then maybe they can use it to label their product or website or something.
Greenwash. Yeah.
There could be something like you have in food, where it's green.
Yeah. So Christopher said that, like, we as professionals, we architects, we should come up with sustainable solutions.
Include those numbers.
And we can include the numbers and show it to our clients, so our clients can go out and say that they are doing something. Of course, I think we should do that. It feels professional to ask, like, okay, but how can we make this sustainable? It should be a question that we always ask. Like, how can this be more accessible? It's the same type of question. But yeah, I think that in a couple of years we will see more and more companies that need to report actual numbers and not just put a eco label on their website. So yeah, I think they're going to ask for it, and that we will have to use the emission dashboard in Azure to make reports. Mm.
Thank you, Sofia.